Before we dive deeper into Annabelle's incredible journey of justice, I need you to do something for me right now. If you believe that parents who abandon their disabled child for vacation deserve everything that's coming to them, smash that like button. Don't just listen and leave. Hit subscribe so you'll never miss another story that speaks to your soul. Ring that notification bell because what Annabelle does next will leave you speechless with satisfaction. I want to know. Drop a comment below and tell me, if you discovered your child had been abandoned like this, would you take them in and seek revenge, or would you try to make peace with the parents? Because Annabelle is about to show us how a brilliant grandmother with unlimited resources destroys two people who thought they could throw away their disabled daughter like garbage. Share this story with someone who believes children should always come first, especially vulnerable children who need extra love and protection. Now, let's watch Annabelle turn abandonment into the most satisfying revenge you've ever heard. My name is Annabelle White, and I'm about to tell you how my own daughter abandoned her disabled child, and how I made her pay for it in ways she never saw coming. It was December 23rd, when they dropped the bombshell that would change everything. I was in my daughter Sarah's sprawling suburban mansion, the one my late husband's life insurance money had helped them buy, watching my 15-year-old granddaughter Emma struggle with her physical therapy exercises. Emma had been born with spina bifida, requiring a wheelchair and constant care. She was the brightest light in my life, brilliant, funny, and determined despite her challenges. While Sarah and her husband Mark seemed to view Emma's condition as an inconvenience, I saw it as what made her extraordinary. "Mom, we need to talk," Sarah said, walking into the living room where I was helping Emma with her homework. At 58, I still turned heads with my silver hair and classic features, but my daughter looked at me like I was a burden she could barely tolerate. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked, not looking up from Emma's math problems. "Mark and I are going on a cruise. We leave tomorrow morning." I glanced up confused. "Tomorrow? But it's Christmas Eve. What about Emma's presents?" "What about?" "That's where you come in," Mark interrupted, his voice carrying that entitled tone I'd grown to despise. "We need you to stay with Emma." "Stay with her? For how long?" Sarah sat down across from me, and I saw something cold in her eyes that made my stomach clench. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. We haven't decided yet." 2 weeks? I repeated, looking at Emma, who had stopped writing and was listening with growing distress. "But Sarah, Emma needs us to have a break," Mark snapped. "Do you have any idea how exhausting it is, dealing with her condition every day? We're young, Annabelle. We deserve to have a life." The words hit me like a physical blow. Emma's face crumpled, and I saw tears starting to form in her beautiful brown eyes. "We can't take her with us," Sarah continued, as if discussing a pet rather than her daughter. "The ship isn't equipped for wheelchairs, and honestly, we need time to ourselves. To remember what it's like to be a couple instead of just caregivers." I felt my hands trembling with rage, but I kept my voice steady. "And you're telling me this now? The day before you leave? We knew you'd make a fuss if we gave you too much notice," Mark said with a shrug. "This way, you can't argue or make plans to avoid it." I looked at my granddaughter, who was trying so hard not to cry. Emma was used to her parents' neglect, but this was beyond anything they'd done before. "Besides," Sarah added with casual cruelty, "it's not like you have anywhere else to be. Your social life isn't exactly demanding." They left the next morning without so much as a proper goodbye to Emma. I watched from the window as they loaded their expensive luggage into their BMW, laughing about something on Mark's phone. Sarah glanced back at the house once, but it wasn't toward Emma's room where their daughter was pretending to sleep. It was toward the security system panel, making sure I knew the alarm code. "Grandma Annabelle?" Emma's voice was small when I checked on her an hour later. "Are they really not coming back for Christmas?" I sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her dark hair away from her face. I'm here, sweetheart. We're going to have the most wonderful Christmas, just the two of us. But they didn't even say goodbye properly, she whispered. Mom just said be good for Grandma like I was a chore she was handing off. That night, after Emma had finally fallen asleep, I sat in Sarah's pristine living room and made a decision that would change all our lives forever. I pulled out my phone and started making calls to real estate agents, to my financial advisor, to lawyers I'd known for decades. If Sarah and Mark wanted a break from their responsibilities, I would give them exactly that. But they would learn that some choices have consequences that last far longer than a 2-week cruise. The next morning, I woke Emma with hot chocolate and homemade pancakes. How would you feel about spending Christmas at my house this year? I asked. Her face lit up. Really? But what about Mom and Dad's cruise rules? What your parents don't know won't hurt them, I said, and for the first time in months, Emma laughed. We packed her things carefully, her medical equipment, her favorite books, her art supplies. As we prepared to leave, I looked around the house that had been bought with my dead husband's money, filled with furniture I'd helped them purchase, decorated with photographs that barely included Emma. I left an envelope on the kitchen counter with a simple note. Gone to give Emma the Christmas she deserves. We'll be at my house. Mom. What I didn't tell them was that by the time they returned, neither of us would ever set foot in that house again. Before we dive deeper into Annabelle's incredible journey of justice, I need you to do something for me. If you believe that parents who abandon their disabled child deserve consequences, hit that like button right now. Don't just listen and leave. Hit subscribe so you'll never miss another story that speaks to your soul. Ring the notification bell because what Annabelle does next will absolutely shock you. Comment below and tell me, would you have taken Emma and left, or would you have stayed to confront those terrible parents? Share this story with someone who believes children should always come first. Now let's see how a brilliant grandmother turns abandonment into the perfect revenge. Emma and I spent the most magical Christmas I could remember in my cozy Victorian home across town. I'd converted my study into a proper bedroom for her, complete with all the accessibility features she needed. Watching her face light up Christmas morning as she opened presents I'd been secretly buying for months was worth everything. But even as we baked cookies and watched old movies, my mind was working on something much more complex. You see, what Sarah and Mark didn't know was that I wasn't just a retired widow living on my late husband's life insurance. I was Annabelle White, former CEO of White Hospitality Group, a woman who had built a restaurant empire from nothing before selling it all when my husband became ill. I had connections they couldn't imagine and resources they'd never bothered to ask about. On December 28th, while they were probably sipping cocktails somewhere in the Caribbean, I received the call I'd been waiting for. Mrs. White? This is Jennifer Mason from Coastal Properties. The house at 1247 Maple Ridge Drive has been listed, and we have a cash buyer already. They're offering $20,000 over asking price and want to close immediately. I smiled, watching Emma do her physical therapy exercises with a private therapist I'd hired. Excellent. Accept the offer. Ma'am, I should mention, the buyers tried to contact the current residents, but no one answered. Should we be concerned about that? Not at all. I have power of attorney for all property decisions. It wasn't entirely true, but the forged documents I'd had prepared were flawless. Sometimes being wealthy means knowing the right people to bend the right rules. By New Year's Eve, Sarah and Mark's house had been sold, their belongings placed in storage, and the proceeds deposited into an account they couldn't access. Legally, it was complicated, but with enough money and the right lawyers, complicated could be made to disappear. Emma, meanwhile, was thriving. Without her parents' constant disappointment weighing on her, she was like a different child. She laughed more, spoke up about her dreams, and even mentioned wanting to try adaptive sports. Grandma Annabelle, she said one evening as I helped her with her nighttime routine, Why didn't Mom and Dad ever seem happy with me? The question broke my heart, but I answered honestly. Some people, sweetheart, are so focused on what they think their lives should look like that they can't see the beautiful reality right in front of them. Are they going to be angry when they come back and find out we're living here? I tucked her into bed, my mind already 3 steps ahead. Let me worry about your parents, Emma. Your job is to focus on being 15 and amazing. That night, I sat in my home office and opened my laptop. It was time to implement phase 2 of my plan. I'd already been in contact with my old business partner, Roberto Santini, who now ran a chain of luxury resorts in Europe. We'd maintained a friendship over the years, and he'd been trying to convince me to come out of retirement for months. Annabelle, darling. His voice crackled through the international call. You sound different. Energized. I am, Roberto. I'm ready to get back in the game, but I have conditions. Name them. I want to start in Monaco. Something exclusive, ultra high-end. And I'm bringing my granddaughter. Roberto laughed, the sound rich with possibility. Monaco it is. When can you start? Next month. After hanging up, I looked in on Emma one more time. She was sleeping peacefully, her face relaxed in a way I'd never seen when she lived with her parents. Sarah and Mark thought they were getting a break from their responsibilities. What they were actually getting was a complete life reset. One where Emma and I would be gone before they even realized what they'd lost. I spent the first week of January making arrangements. Emma would be enrolled in an exclusive international school in Monaco that specialized in students with special needs. I hired a full-time care coordinator, arranged for her medical equipment to be shipped, and even found adaptive sports programs that would challenge and inspire her. We're moving to Monaco? Emma asked when I finally told her the plan. Like, Monaco, Monaco? With the prince and the casinos. The very one. You'll love the school there, and I'm going to be working with some of the most exclusive restaurants in the world. But what about Mom and Dad? I knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her hands in mine. Emma, your parents made a choice when they left you. They chose to prioritize their own wants over your needs. I'm choosing to prioritize you over everything else. Tears filled her eyes, but they were tears of relief, not sadness. You really want me with you? Even though I'm complicated? You're not complicated, sweetheart. You're extraordinary. And any parent who can't see that doesn't deserve you. We left for Monaco on January 15th, exactly 3 weeks after Sarah and Mark had abandoned their daughter for a cruise. I left one final envelope on the kitchen counter of the house they no longer owned. Sarah and Mark, by the time you read this, Emma and I will be starting our new life in Monaco. You wanted a break from being parents. Congratulations, you now have a permanent one. The house has been sold to cover Emma's future care and education. You'll find your belongings in storage unit number 47 at Secure Space on Miller Road. You taught me that blood doesn't make family, love does. Since you couldn't love Emma enough to stay for Christmas, I'm taking her somewhere she'll be cherished. Don't try to contact us. Annabelle. P.S. Emma sends her love. She's already excited about her new school and the adapted sailing program they have in Monaco. Amazing what happens when someone believes in her potential. As our plane lifted off from JFK, I held Emma's hand and watched America shrink below us. Behind us, we were leaving 2 people who were about to discover that abandoning family has consequences they never imagined. Ahead of us lay Monaco, opportunity, and a new life where Emma would never again be made to feel like a burden. The best part? This was only the beginning of my revenge. Monaco was everything I had hoped it would be for Emma, and more than I had expected for myself. Within a month, my granddaughter was thriving at the International Academy of Monaco, a school where her wheelchair was just another form of mobility and her brilliant mind was celebrated rather than overshadowed by her parents' disappointment. Meanwhile, I was rediscovering why I had once been considered one of the most formidable businesswomen in the hospitality industry. Roberto had connected me with Prince Albert's Cultural Foundation, which was looking for someone to revitalize Le Jardin Étoile, a historic restaurant that had been struggling since its legendary founder passed away. The location was perfect, overlooking the Mediterranean with a view of the palace, but it had been serving uninspired food to tourists instead of creating the kind of dining experience that made Monaco famous. The lease alone is worth €3 million, Roberto explained as we toured the space. But the foundation is more interested in prestige than profit. They want someone who can restore its reputation. I walked through the dining room, noting the stunning architecture and the potential for something truly spectacular. What's the timeline? 6 months to prove concept, 2 years to establish profitability. After that, you have an option to buy. Done. What Roberto didn't know was that I was already working on something much bigger than just one restaurant. I had been making calls to my network, celebrity chefs, wine collectors, food critics, and the kind of ultra-wealthy individuals who could make or break a high-end establishment with a single social media post. By March, Le Jardin Étoile had been completely transformed. I'd brought in Marco Delacroix, a Michelin-starred chef who had been looking for the right opportunity to create something revolutionary. The menu featured molecular gastronomy techniques applied to classic Mediterranean flavors, creating dishes that were as much art as food. But the real genius was in the exclusivity. Tables were available only by invitation or personal recommendation. The waiting list included royalty, tech billionaires, and A-list celebrities. Getting a reservation at Le Jardin Étoile became a status symbol across Europe. Grandma Annabelle, Emma said one evening as we had dinner on our apartment's terrace overlooking the harbor, "My history teacher said you're becoming famous. She showed me an article about you in some fancy magazine." I smiled, thinking about the Forbes piece that had called me the phoenix of fine dining and detailed my comeback story. What they didn't know was that this was all carefully orchestrated revenge, not a career resurrection. Fame isn't the goal, sweetheart. Excellence is. But you're happy here, right? Happier than you were back home. I looked at my granddaughter, who had grown 3 inches in 6 months and was glowing with confidence and health. Her adapted sailing instructor said she had natural talent, and her grades were the best of her life. I'm happier than I've been in years, Emma. We both are. What I didn't tell her was that part of my happiness came from the reports I was receiving from my private investigator back in the States. Sarah and Mark had returned from their cruise to find their house sold, their belongings in storage, and their daughter gone. The legal battle to contest the sale was going nowhere. My lawyers were better than theirs, and I had made sure every document was ironclad. They were currently living in a cramped apartment, fighting constantly, and facing the reality that they had lost everything: their house, their daughter, and their comfortable lifestyle for a 2-week cruise. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was still coming. In May, I received a call that would set the final phase of my plan in motion. "Mrs. White, this is Amanda Chen from Venture Global Investments. We've been following your work in Monaco, and we have a proposition that might interest you." Amanda represented a consortium of investors who were looking to fund a chain of ultra-luxury dining experiences across Europe. They had seen what I'd accomplished with Le Jardin Étoile and wanted to back my expansion. "We're talking about €100 million investment," Amanda explained during our video call. "London, Paris, Rome, Barcelona, the finest locations in each city. You would have complete creative control and a 60% ownership stake." It was exactly the opportunity one had been maneuvering toward. Not just because it would make me incredibly wealthy, I was already that, but because it would make me impossible to ignore. "I'm interested," I said, "but I have some conditions." The negotiation took 3 weeks, but when it was done, I had secured not just funding but something much more valuable: a platform for the kind of public success that would be impossible for Sarah and Mark to dismiss or ignore. By summer, the European food media was calling me the Empress of Elegance, and my story was being featured in magazines around the world. Photos of Emma and me at charity galas and cultural events were appearing in society pages. My granddaughter, beautiful and poised in her custom wheelchair, was being photographed alongside princesses and philanthropists. Everything was going perfectly according to plan. The only thing left was to let Sarah and Mark know exactly what they had thrown away. While Emma and I were building our new life in Monaco, Sarah and Mark were discovering what it meant to face consequences for the first time in their entitled lives. According to my private investigators' reports, they had returned from their cruise to find their house sold and their daughter gone. The initial shock had given way to rage, then to legal action, and finally to the dawning realization that they had been outmaneuvered by someone with far more resources and intelligence than they possessed. But I wasn't content to let them suffer in ignorance. They needed to understand exactly what they had lost and what they could have had if they hadn't abandoned their daughter. In June, I had my assistant send them a package. Inside was a simple manila envelope containing what appeared to be worthless stock certificates for a small tech company called Adaptive Innovations International. The accompanying note was brief. Sarah and Mark found these in my old investment files. Thought you might find them interesting since they relate to adaptive technology for disabled individuals. Consider it a belated Christmas gift. Annabelle. What they didn't know was that Adaptive Innovations was a startup I had been quietly funding for the past 6 months. The company was developing revolutionary wheelchair technology and adaptive devices that would transform the lives of people with mobility challenges like Emma. I had met the founder, Dr. Sarah Kim, through Emma's school in Monaco. Dr. Kim was a brilliant engineer whose own daughter had spina bifida, and she had dedicated her career to creating technology that would give disabled children more independence and opportunities. The stock certificates I sent to Sarah and Mark represented a 5% stake in the company, shares I had purchased in their names months earlier as part of a much larger investment strategy. According to my investigator, they did exactly what I expected them to do. They looked at the documents, laughed at my pathetic attempt at investing in some disability charity, and threw the certificates in a drawer. Can you believe this? Mark had apparently said to Sarah, "Your mother thinks we want her pity stocks in some wheelchair company. Like we care about that stuff anymore." "It's just another way for her to make us feel guilty about Emma," Sarah had replied. "She's probably hoping we'll feel bad and beg her to bring Emma back." They had no idea that those worthless stocks were about to become the key to a fortune that would dwarf anything they had ever imagined. While they were dismissing my gift, I was orchestrating the deal that would make Adaptive Innovations the most talked-about tech company in the world. Through my restaurant connections, I had access to some of the wealthiest people in Europe. A dinner conversation with Klaus Weber, a German tech billionaire, led to his investment in Dr. Kim's company. A casual mention to Princess Charlene of Monaco resulted in royal endorsement for the adaptive sports equipment division. But the real coup came through Emma herself. My brilliant granddaughter had been working with Dr. Kim's team to test some of their prototypes. Emma's insights and suggestions led to breakthroughs that made their wheelchair technology not just functional but revolutionary. "Grandma Annabelle," Emma said excitedly one afternoon in August, "Dr. Kim says my ideas helped them solve a problem they'd been working on for years. The new wheelchair design is going to help so many kids like me." "Tell me about it, sweetheart." "It's called Adaptive AI Assistance. The wheelchair learns how you move and adjusts automatically to make everything easier. Plus, it connects to phones and computers so you can control your whole environment. Dr. Kim says it's going to change everything for disabled people." She was right. When Adaptive Innovations announced their breakthrough in September, the tech world went crazy. Venture capital firms started a bidding war to invest. Major disability advocacy groups endorsed the technology. Most importantly, several government agencies expressed interest in purchasing the devices for public programs. The stock price exploded overnight. Those worthless shares I had given Sarah and Mark were suddenly worth $12 million. But they had no idea because they had thrown the certificates away and never bothered to track the company's progress. I, meanwhile, had become the largest single investor in adaptive innovations. My initial investment of 20 million euros was now worth over 200 million. But more than the money, I had the satisfaction of knowing that Emma's insights and experiences had contributed to technology that would help thousands of children like her. She was no longer just a disabled child her parents saw as a burden. She was an innovator whose ideas were changing the world. The irony was perfect. Sarah and Mark had abandoned their daughter because they saw her disability as something to escape from. Meanwhile, that same disability had led to innovations that could have made them incredibly wealthy if only they had cared enough to pay attention. On Emma's 16th birthday in October, I threw her a party at Le Jardin Étoile. The guest list included the Prince and Princess of Monaco, several world-renowned chefs, and Dr. Kim with her family. Emma, radiant in a custom-designed dress that coordinated perfectly with her elegant wheelchair, was the center of attention as cameras captured every moment. The photos appeared in magazines across Europe, showing my beautiful, confident granddaughter celebrating with royalty and business leaders. The articles mentioned her contributions to adaptive technology and her grandmother's remarkable business comeback. I made sure copies of every magazine were sent to Sarah and Mark's cramped apartment in New Jersey. Let them see what their daughter had become when someone believed in her potential instead of seeing her as a burden. Let them realize what they had thrown away for a 2-week cruise. But this was still just the beginning. The real crescendo of my revenge was yet to come. The news broke on a cold November morning in Monaco, but its shockwaves reached around the world within hours. Adaptive Innovations International had been acquired by Apple for $2.8 billion, making it one of the largest tech acquisitions of the year. I was having breakfast with Emma on our terrace when my phone began buzzing incessantly with calls from financial reporters, business journalists, and investment analysts who had discovered my connection to the company. "Grandma Annabelle," Emma said, looking up from her tablet where she was reading the news, "this says you're going to be really, really rich." I smiled, watching the Mediterranean sparkle in the morning sun. "We already are really rich, sweetheart. What we're about to become is something much more powerful." The numbers were staggering. My investment in adaptive innovations had grown from 20 million euros to $1.4 billion overnight. I was now one of the wealthiest women in Europe, with resources that put me in the same category as tech billionaires and oil heiresses. But the most satisfying part wasn't the money. It was knowing that Sarah and Mark had literally thrown away their share of this fortune. My assistant confirmed what I already knew. They still had the stock certificates I had sent them, still sitting in the drawer where they had tossed them months ago. Those pieces of paper were now worth $12 million, but they had no idea. "Should I arrange for someone to inform them?" my assistant asked. "Not yet," I said. "Let them discover it on their own. It will be much more educational that way." The discovery came 3 days later, when Mark apparently saw a news story about the acquisition and noticed the name Adaptive Innovations. According to my investigator, he had frantically searched their apartment until he found the certificates, then spent an hour on the phone with various financial institutions trying to determine their value. The conversation with Sarah that followed was apparently spectacular. "You threw them away?" Mark had screamed. "You said they were worthless charity stocks." "You agreed with me," Sarah had screamed back. "You're the one who said we didn't need Annabelle's pity investments. Do you understand what this means? Do you understand what we just lost? It's not our fault. How are we supposed to know Annabelle was involved in some billion-dollar deal? But of course, it was their fault. If they had cared enough about their daughter to understand adaptive technology, If they had bothered to research the company before dismissing it, if they had shown even basic respect for my judgment, they would have been millionaires. Instead, they were living in a one-bedroom apartment, working minimum-wage jobs, and fighting constantly about whose fault it was that their lives had imploded. The media attention following the acquisition was intense, but perfectly managed. I granted exactly 3 interviews to Forbes, the Financial Times, and Vanity Fair, each one carefully crafted to tell the story I wanted told. The narrative was perfect. A brilliant businesswoman who had retired to care for her family, only to return to the business world when family circumstances changed. The articles mentioned Emma prominently, describing her as my inspiration and highlighting her contributions to the adaptive technology that had made the fortune possible. My granddaughter taught me that what some people see as limitations are actually opportunities for innovation, I told the Forbes reporter. She's shown me that the most extraordinary achievements often come from the most unexpected sources. Emma, who sat beside me during the interview in her custom wheelchair wearing a designer dress, was articulate and confident as she discussed her work with Dr. Kim's team. I think a lot of people don't realize that disabled kids have ideas that could help everyone, she said. We just need people to listen to us instead of feeling sorry for us. The interviewer was visibly moved. And your parents? They must be incredibly proud of both of you. Emma glanced at me, and I saw a flicker of the old sadness in her eyes. My parents and I don't really have a relationship anymore, she said quietly. They made some choices that hurt me very much. But I'm grateful that Grandma Annabelle showed me what it feels like to have family who actually want me around. The quote appeared in print exactly as she said it, accompanied by a stunning photograph of Emma and me on the terrace of Le Jardin Étoile, with the Monaco harbor glittering behind us. I made sure the magazine was delivered to Sarah and Mark's apartment. But the best part came when Emma's story began inspiring other families. Letters poured in from parents of disabled children, thanking us for showing that kids like Emma could contribute to world-changing innovations. Disability advocacy groups invited Emma to speak at conferences. Universities began offering her early admission based on her work with adaptive technology. My granddaughter, who had been abandoned by her parents as a burden, was becoming a global symbol of potential and resilience. Meanwhile, Sarah and Mark were dealing with the consequences of their choices in increasingly public ways. Mark had been fired from his job after missing too much work due to personal problems. Apparently, he had become obsessed with trying to figure out ways to claim their share of the adaptive innovations fortune, despite having no legal standing to do so. Sarah had developed what her former friends described as a drinking problem and had been seen crying in public places while clutching magazine articles about Emma's success. Their marriage was disintegrating under the weight of their regret and mutual blame. Perfect. On New Year's Eve, Emma and I attended a charity gala in Monte Carlo where she was being honored for her contributions to adaptive technology research. She looked absolutely stunning in an emerald green gown that complemented her wheelchair's custom metallic finish. As photographers captured her receiving an award from Princess Charlene, I thought about Sarah and Mark, probably sitting in their cramped apartment, watching the coverage on whatever small television they could afford. They had abandoned their daughter to go on a cruise. Now that daughter was dining with royalty, while they faced a future of poverty and regret. The revenge was so perfect it almost felt too easy. Almost. Are you seeing the incredible transformation in Emma's life? If you're amazed by how Annabelle turned abandonment into empowerment, hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of people who turned their pain into power. Share this with someone who needs to see that sometimes the best revenge is living well. Ring the notification bell because you won't want to miss how this incredible story reaches its climax. Comment below. Do you think Sarah and Mark are getting what they deserve? Or is Annabelle being too harsh? Let me know your thoughts. By the spring of Emma's 17th year, I had become exactly what I'd set out to be: untouchable, undeniably successful, and completely beyond the reach of the people who had hurt my granddaughter. My restaurant empire now spanned 6 European cities, each location booked months in advance by celebrities, royalty, and tech billionaires. My investment portfolio, anchored by the Adaptive Innovations windfall, had grown to nearly $2 billion. More importantly, Emma had blossomed into a confident young woman whose insights continued to drive innovations in adaptive technology. But success, I had learned, was only half of revenge. The other half was ensuring that Sarah and Mark fully understood what they had lost, and that they would never, ever get it back. That's why I called my attorney, Philippe Dubois, to my Monaco office on a bright April morning. "I want to update my will," I told him as we sat in my office overlooking the harbor where Emma was taking her weekly adaptive sailing lesson. A distinguished man who had handled estate planning for some of Europe's wealthiest families opened his leather portfolio. "Of course, Madam White. What changes would you like to make?" "I want to ensure that my biological daughter and her husband are explicitly excluded from any inheritance, now and forever." "May I ask the reason for this decision?" I handed him a folder containing every piece of documentation from the past 18 months, the cruise tickets proving Sarah and Mark had abandoned Emma, the legal records of the house sale, the private investigators' reports detailing their continued callousness toward their daughter. Philippe read through the materials with increasing gravity. "This is quite comprehensive. You've clearly given this considerable thought." "I've given it 18 months of thought. I want the will to include a detailed explanation of why they're being excluded, along with evidence of their abandonment of Emma. I want it read aloud at the will reading, so there's no possibility of them claiming ignorance or painting themselves as victims." "And the primary beneficiary?" I looked out the window where Emma was gracefully maneuvering her adapted sailboat, her face glowing with joy and concentration. "Emma, of course, along with educational trusts, medical funds, and provisions for her care throughout her lifetime." "What about your business interests?" "Emma will inherit controlling stakes in all my restaurants and investment portfolios when she turns 25. Until then, they'll be managed by a trust with explicit instructions to fund her education, her adaptive technology research, and any other pursuits that bring her joy." Philippe made detailed notes. "And if Sarah and Mark attempt to contest the will?" I smiled. "They're welcome to try. But they'll discover that abandoning a disabled child creates a very strong legal precedent for disinheritance. Plus, I have video evidence of their cruelty that I'm quite sure they wouldn't want made public in a courtroom." What I didn't tell Philippe was that I had been recording every interaction with Sarah and Mark for years, including the Christmas morning when they announced their cruise plans. Emma's reaction, their callous dismissal of her feelings, their casual cruelty, all of it was preserved in high-definition video that would destroy any sympathy a jury might have for them. After Philippe left, I sat alone in my office, looking at the framed photograph on my desk from Emma's recent 17th birthday party. She was surrounded by friends from her international school, young people from around the world who saw her wheelchair as just another part of who she was, not something to be ashamed of or overcome. The contrast with her life in America couldn't have been starker. There, she had been isolated, seen as a burden, hidden away from her parents' social events. Here, she was celebrated, encouraged, and given every opportunity to develop her remarkable intellect and creativity. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Grandma Annabelle, I just won the sailing race. The instructor says I'm ready for the advanced program." I typed back, "Congratulations, sweetheart. Dinner at Le Jardin Étoile to celebrate. Can Dr. Kim and her family come too? I want to tell them about the new steering mechanism I thought of during the race." "Of course. I'll call Marco and have him prepare something special." As I made the reservation, I thought about Sarah and Mark, who would never see their daughter's triumph, never witness her innovations, never know the remarkable young woman she was becoming. They had given up the right to be proud of Emma when they chose a cruise over Christmas with their child. Now they would spend the rest of their lives knowing that their daughter had become extraordinary despite them, not because of them. But I wasn't finished with them yet. The will was just one element of my grand finale. The real crescendo would come when they learned exactly how much they had lost, not just financially, but in every way that mattered. That evening, Emma and I dined with Dr. Kim's family at my flagship restaurant. Emma, elegant in a navy blue dress that brought out her eyes, explained her latest ideas for improving adaptive sailing equipment to an audience of engineers and innovators who hung on her every word. The problem with current designs, she said, gesturing with the confidence of someone who had been taken seriously her entire life in Monaco, is that they assume disabled sailors are less capable. But what if we designed equipment that actually gave us advantages? Like steering systems that respond to minimal input, or sensors that help us read wind patterns better than able-bodied sailors. That's exactly the kind of thinking that led to our breakthrough with the wheelchair. Instead of trying to make disabled people more normal, we asked how we could make them more capable. I watched this conversation with immense pride, knowing that Emma's parents had never once asked her what she thought about anything, let alone encouraged her innovations. After dinner, Emma and I walked along the harbor, her wheelchair gliding smoothly on the premium paths I had personally funded as part of Monaco's accessibility improvements. "Grandma Annabelle," she said thoughtfully, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if Mom and Dad had taken me on that cruise instead of leaving me behind? What do you think would have happened?" "I think I'd still be living in their house, feeling like a burden, never knowing that I could actually contribute to things that matter." She paused. "I know it sounds terrible, but I'm glad they left me. It gave me you, and this life, and the chance to be someone who matters." I stopped walking and knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her hands. "Emma, you have always mattered. You mattered the day you were born, and you would have mattered even if you had never contributed a single idea to adaptive technology. The problem was never you, it was their inability to see your value. I know that now, but it took coming here and seeing how differently people could treat me to really understand it." That night, as I reviewed the final draft of my will, I felt a deep satisfaction. Sarah and Mark thought they had discarded a burden when they abandoned Emma. Instead, they had discarded a treasure, not just because of what Emma would become, but because of who she had always been. They would learn that lesson when they read my will, but by then it would be far too late to matter. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning in June, delivered by courier to my Monaco office. The envelope was cream-colored with gold embossing, and the return address made me smile. The International Business Excellence Foundation, New York. I had been selected to receive the Global Entrepreneur of the Year award, recognizing my remarkable comeback and innovative contributions to the hospitality industry. The ceremony would be televised worldwide and attended by heads of state, business leaders, and celebrities. It was exactly the platform I needed for the next phase of my plan. "Grandma Annabelle, this is huge," Emma exclaimed when I showed her the invitation that evening. "They're calling it the Oscars of the business world in this article." I looked at the Forbes piece she was reading on her tablet, which described the award as the most prestigious honor in international business. Previous recipients included the founders of Google, the CEO of Tesla, and 3 Nobel Prize winners. "Will you come with me to New York?" I asked. "Really? You want me there?" "Emma, you're not just my granddaughter. You're my inspiration and my business partner. Dr. Kim's company wouldn't exist without your innovations, and my investment success is directly tied to your insights. Of course I want you there." The logistics of returning to New York after nearly 2 years were complex, but I had the resources to make it seamless. I chartered a private jet equipped with all of Emma's accessibility needs, booked a penthouse suite at the plaza that had been modified for wheelchair access, and arranged for a full security detail. I also made sure that Sarah and Mark would know about every detail of our visit. The media coverage began before we even landed. Photos of Emma and me boarding the private jet in Monaco appeared in society magazines alongside articles about my Cinderella story business comeback. The narrative was perfect. The devoted grandmother who had built an empire to secure her disabled granddaughter's future. What the articles didn't mention was that Sarah and Mark were living 45 minutes from Manhattan in a cramped apartment, working retail jobs to pay rent, and watching their daughter's success from afar through magazine articles and social media posts they weren't supposed to see. The award ceremony was held at Lincoln Center, with a red carpet that stretched for 2 blocks. As our limousine pulled up, I could see the photographers and reporters lined up behind velvet ropes, cameras flashing as celebrities and business leaders made their entrances. "Are you nervous?" I asked Emma as our security team prepared to escort us out. "A little," she admitted, "but mostly excited. I've never been to anything like this." "Just remember, you belong here. You've earned your place among these people through your own brilliance and hard work." Emma looked stunning in a custom Valentino gown that had been designed specifically to complement her wheelchair. The chair itself had been modified by Dr. Kim's team with decorative elements that made it look more like a throne than medical equipment. As we made our way down the red carpet, photographers called out our names, reporters requested interviews, and the crowd of onlookers cheered. Emma handled it all with grace and confidence, answering questions about her adaptive technology work with the poise of someone who had been in the spotlight her entire life. "Emma, what's it like having the most successful grandmother in business?" one reporter asked. "She's not just successful in business," Emma replied smoothly. "She's successful at being the kind of family everyone deserves. She believed in me when other people didn't, and that made all the difference." The quote would appear in dozens of publications over the next week, each one a subtle reminder to Sarah and Mark of what they had given up. Inside Lincoln Center, I was seated at the head table with tech billionaires, media moguls, and government officials. Emma sat beside me, contributing thoughtfully to conversations about innovation, accessibility, and the future of technology. When my name was called to receive the award, I walked to the podium with the confidence of someone who had not just succeeded, but triumphed over circumstances that would have broken a lesser person. 18 months ago, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium. I was a retired widow living quietly with my granddaughter. Today, I stand before you as proof that the greatest innovations often come from the most unexpected circumstances. I spoke about Emma's contributions to adaptive technology, about the importance of seeing potential where others saw limitations, and about the responsibility of successful people to lift up those who had been overlooked or underestimated. My granddaughter taught me that what some people call disabilities are actually just different ways of solving problems. She showed me that the most valuable insights often come from perspectives that society tends to dismiss. Most importantly, she proved that when you believe in someone completely, they will achieve things that seemed impossible. The standing ovation lasted for nearly 3 minutes. As I returned to my seat, I saw tears in Emma's eyes, tears of pride and joy, not the sadness I used to see when her parents made her feel unwanted. The after-party was held at the Museum of Modern Art, where Emma and I mingled with heads of state and celebrities who were genuinely interested in her work and her perspectives. She was treated as an equal contributor to our success, not as a prop or an inspiration object. "Your granddaughter is remarkable," said the CEO of Microsoft as we chatted near a Picasso. "Has she considered studying at MIT? I know people there who would be very interested in her innovations." "We're exploring several options," I replied. "Emma has her choice of universities around the world." Later that evening, as Emma and I sat in our hotel suite overlooking Central Park, she scrolled through the news coverage on her tablet. "Look at this headline," she said, showing me her screen. "The grandmother-granddaughter team revolutionizing business and technology." And this photo of us is everywhere. I looked at the image. Emma and me on the red carpet, both of us smiling confidently as flashbulbs illuminated our faces. We looked like what we were, a formidable team that had conquered the business world together. Do you think Mom and Dad will see these articles? Emma asked quietly. I'm sure they will. Do you think they'll regret what they did? I considered the question carefully. I think they already regret it, sweetheart. But regret doesn't undo choices, and it doesn't repair damage. They made their decision when they chose a cruise over Christmas with you. Now they get to live with the consequences of that choice forever. Emma nodded, then surprised me with her next question. Do you think you'll ever forgive them? Forgiveness isn't about them, Emma. It's about me choosing not to carry anger that would poison my happiness. I forgave them long ago, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. But you're still punishing them. I'm not punishing them, sweetheart. I'm simply living my life and protecting you from people who proved they couldn't be trusted with your well-being. There's a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. That night, as Emma slept in the adjoining room, I stood at the window looking out at the city where my daughter and her husband were probably watching coverage of our triumph on whatever small television they could afford. They had wanted a break from their responsibilities as parents. I had given them exactly that, a permanent break that would last for the rest of their lives. Tomorrow, we would fly back to Monaco, where Emma would continue her education and her innovations, and I would continue building an empire that would secure her future forever. But before we left, I had one final message to deliver. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in nearly 2 years. I drove to Sarah and Mark's apartment building in New Jersey. Not to see them. I had no intention of speaking to them ever again. But I wanted to see for myself what their choices had cost them, and I wanted to deliver one final piece of information that would complete their understanding of what they had lost. The building was exactly what I expected, a rundown complex with cracked sidewalks and broken security gates. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor of a structure that had clearly seen better decades. I could see into their unit through the thin curtains, sparse furniture, a small television, the kind of cramped living space that screamed financial desperation. I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in my rented car across the street and called my private investigator. Tell me about their current situation, I said. Marcus Chen had been monitoring Sarah and Mark for 2 years, providing me with regular reports on their deteriorating circumstances. His updates had become my guilty pleasure, not because I enjoyed their suffering, but because I needed to know that Emma was truly safe from any attempt they might make to reclaim her. Mark lost his job at the electronics store last month, Marcus reported. Apparently, he became obsessed with trying to research investment opportunities, spending hours on the phone during work trying to contact brokers about cryptocurrency and tech stocks. His manager got tired of the personal calls. And Sarah? Still working at the department store, but her performance reviews are poor. Coworkers say she drinks during lunch breaks and spends most of her time looking at magazine articles about you and Emma on her phone. Her supervisor has issued 2 written warnings. What about their marriage? Deteriorating rapidly. The neighbors report frequent screaming matches, usually about money or about whose fault it is that they lost everything. Mark apparently blames Sarah for throwing away the stock certificates you sent them. Sarah blames Mark for supporting her decision to abandon Emma. I nodded, unsurprised. Selfish people always turned on each other when consequences arrived. One more thing, Marcus continued. They've been trying to contact Emma directly. Social media messages, emails to her school, even attempting to call your Monaco number. Nothing threatening, but definitely persistent. That information made my blood run cold. How persistent? Multiple attempts per week. The messages range from apologies to demands that Emma come home where she belongs. Your security team has been intercepting everything, but I thought you should know. I ended the call and sat in my car, watching their building and thinking about what Marcus had told me. Sarah and Mark weren't just living with the consequences of their choices. They were actively trying to undo them by reaching out to Emma. That couldn't be allowed to continue. I pulled out my phone and made 2 calls. The first was to my head of security, instructing him to increase monitoring of all communications directed toward Emma. The second was to Philippe, my attorney. I need you to draft a cease and desist order, I told him. Sarah and Mark Benjamin are attempting to contact my granddaughter against my wishes. I want them legally prohibited from any form of communication with her. On what grounds? Abandonment, emotional abuse, and harassment. I have documentation of their initial abandonment, evidence of the psychological damage they caused Emma, and records of their current unwanted contact attempts. I'll have the papers filed within 24 hours. But a legal order wouldn't be enough. Sarah and Mark needed to understand, once and for all, that Emma was beyond their reach permanently. I got out of my car and walked to their building's mailboxes in the lobby. Using a key my security team had obtained through entirely legal means, I opened their mailbox and left a single manila envelope inside. The envelope contained 3 items: a copy of the cease and desist order Philippe would file, a recent photograph of Emma receiving her latest academic award in Monaco, and a brief note written on my personal stationery. Sarah and Mark, this is your legal notice to cease all contact with Emma immediately. Any further attempts to reach her will result in restraining orders and harassment charges. The photograph shows Emma receiving the European Young Innovator Award last month. She was honored for her contributions to adaptive technology research that have improved the lives of thousands of disabled children worldwide. She is happy, successful, and surrounded by people who value her brilliance rather than resenting her needs. She has never once asked about you. You made your choice on December 23rd when you decided a cruise was more important than Christmas with your daughter. The consequences of that choice are permanent. Do not contact us again. Annabelle White. P.S. Emma's 18th birthday is next month. She'll be celebrating in Monaco with the prince and princess, along with several tech billionaires who are funding her college education. You won't be invited. As I drove away from their building, I felt a sense of completion. Sarah and Mark would receive my message within hours, and they would finally understand that their daughter had moved beyond their reach permanently. But the real satisfaction came that evening, when Emma video called me from Monaco to share her latest news. Grandma Annabelle. Dr. Kim's team wants me to co-author a paper for the International Journal of Adaptive Technology. And MIT formally offered me early admission with a full research fellowship. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Have you decided what you want to study? Biomedical engineering with a focus on adaptive technology. I want to design equipment that doesn't just help disabled people cope. I want to create technology that gives us advantages no one else has. As we talked about her future plans, I thought about Sarah and Mark opening my envelope, reading about their daughter's achievements, and realizing that they would never be part of any of it. They had abandoned a remarkable child because they saw her disability as a burden. Now they would spend the rest of their lives knowing that same child had become extraordinary despite them, not because of them. The cracks in their castle had become complete collapse, and there was no way back to what they had destroyed. Perfect. Emma turned 18 in Monaco on a perfect September day, surrounded by friends from her international school, tech industry leaders who had become her mentors, and the chosen family we had built together over the past 3 years. The celebration was held at Le Jardin Étoile, which had been closed to the public for the evening. Prince Albert and Princess Charlene attended, along with Dr. Kim's family, several Nobel Prize winners, and the CEOs of 3 major tech companies who were competing to fund Emma's college research projects. As I watched my granddaughter, no longer the abandoned child I had rescued, but a confident young woman who commanded respect from some of the world's most brilliant minds, I felt a satisfaction that went far beyond revenge. Grandma Annabelle, Emma said as we stepped onto the restaurant's terrace for a private moment during the party. I have something to tell you. What is it, sweetheart? MIT wants me to start my PhD program immediately. They're offering me my own lab and unlimited research funding to continue developing adaptive technologies. I felt my breath catch. That's incredible, Emma. But are you ready to leave Monaco? This has been your home for 3 years. It has been home, she agreed. But you taught me that home isn't a place. It's the people who believe in you. Wherever you are, that's where I belong. What are you saying? Emma smiled, and I saw in her face the confident young woman she had become. I'm saying that you've built this amazing empire in Europe, but maybe it's time for both of us to conquer America. MIT is offering you a position as entrepreneur in residence, and they want us to work together on commercializing my adaptive technology innovations. The idea was breathtaking in its perfection. We would return to America not as the abandoned grandmother and disabled granddaughter who had fled 3 years ago, but as a business dynasty that commanded international respect. Besides, Emma added with a mischievous smile, I want to give my MIT acceptance speech at the same university where Mom got her law degree. I want her to see what she threw away when she chose that cruise over me. 6 months later, we returned to Boston in triumph. Emma's acceptance to MIT's PhD program at 18 had made international news, with headlines calling her the youngest tech innovator in history and the genius who turned disability into advantage. My appointment as entrepreneur in residence came with a multi-million-dollar fund to invest in student innovations and a mandate to lecture on business strategy to the university's most advanced students. We purchased a stunning townhouse in Back Bay that had been completely customized for Emma's accessibility needs. The home featured an elevator, adaptive technology throughout, and a state-of-the-art lab where Emma could continue her research. But the most satisfying part of our return was the media attention it generated. The Boston Globe ran a front-page feature on Emma's achievements, complete with photos of her in her custom wheelchair working alongside MIT's top researchers. The article mentioned her grandmother's role in supporting her education and innovations, describing me as the businesswoman who saw genius where others saw limitation. Harvard Business Review published a case study on my restaurant empire and investment strategy, using my success as an example of how personal motivation could drive business innovation. Forbes updated my net worth to $2.8 billion, ranking me among the top 50 wealthiest women in America. Every article, every interview, every public appearance was a reminder to Sarah and Mark of what they had lost when they abandoned their daughter for a 2-week cruise. But the real triumph came when Emma gave her first public lecture at MIT, speaking to an audience of tech leaders and venture capitalists about the future of adaptive technology. 3 years ago, she began, standing confidently at the podium while her wheelchair gleamed under the stage lights. I was a 15-year-old girl whose parents saw my disability as something to escape from. Today, I'm here to tell you that disability isn't a limitation. It's a design challenge that leads to innovations everyone can benefit from. The audience was mesmerized as Emma described her work, her vision for the future, and her determination to prove that different perspectives create better solutions. I'm grateful to my parents for one thing, she concluded. They taught me that family isn't about biology, it's about who shows up when you need them most. My grandmother showed up, and together we've built something extraordinary. The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. After the lecture, we had dinner at my Boston restaurant, another Le Jardin Etoile location that had opened to immediate acclaim. As we sat at our private table overlooking the harbor, Emma raised her champagne glass in a toast. To the woman who turned abandonment into opportunity, she said. To the young woman who turned limitation into innovation, I replied. As our glasses clinked, I thought about Sarah and Mark, probably watching coverage of Emma's lecture on whatever screen they could afford. They would see their daughter commanding respect from brilliant minds, achieving things they had never dreamed possible, living a life of purpose and acclaim. And they would know that none of it would ever include them. They had made their choice 3 years ago when they decided a cruise was more important than Christmas with their disabled daughter. Now they would live forever with the knowledge of what that choice had cost them, not just financially, but in every way that mattered. The sweet life Emma and I had built together was the best revenge of all. 3 years to the day after Sarah and Mark had abandoned Emma for their cruise, I received a letter that completed the circle of my revenge in the most poetic way possible. The envelope was hand-delivered to my Boston office by courier, marked personal and urgent, in Sarah's familiar handwriting. Inside was a desperate plea that read like the final cry of someone who had lost everything. Dear Mother, I know you probably won't read this, and I know I have no right to ask anything of you after what we did. But I'm writing anyway because I need you to know that not a day goes by that I don't regret December 23rd. We were selfish and cruel, and we threw away the most important thing in our lives for something completely meaningless. I know that now. Mark and I have lost everything. Our house, our jobs, our marriage, our self-respect. But none of that matters compared to losing Emma. I've seen the articles about her success at MIT. I've watched videos of her lectures. I've read about your business empire and how you've supported her dreams. She's become everything I never believed she could be, and it's because you gave her what I couldn't: unconditional love and belief in her potential. I'm not asking for money or forgiveness. I know I don't deserve either. I'm asking for one thing: the chance to see Emma once, to tell her I'm sorry, and to let her know that her mother finally understands how extraordinary she is. Mark and I are getting divorced. We can't stand the sight of each other anymore because we both know we destroyed our daughter's life and our own. But before we completely destroy what's left of ourselves, I need Emma to know that I love her. I always loved her. I was just too selfish and scared to show it. Please. One conversation. One chance to tell my daughter that I'm proud of her and sorry for everything I put her through. With love and desperate regret, Sarah. P.S. I found the stock certificates you sent us. They're worth $12 million now. We kept them all this time, but never bothered to check their value. It's the perfect metaphor for how we treated Emma. We had something precious and threw it away because we couldn't see its worth. I read the letter twice, then set it aside and called Emma at her MIT lab. Grandma Annabelle. Perfect timing. I just had a breakthrough with the neural interface design. We might be able to create wheelchairs that respond to thought patterns rather than physical input. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Listen, I received a letter from your mother today. She's asking to see you. There was a long pause. What did she say? She says she's sorry and that she wants to tell you she's proud of you. Another pause. Do you think she means it? I think she's desperate and full of regret. Whether that translates to genuine change, I honestly don't know. What do you think I should do? I looked out my office window at the Boston skyline, thinking about the 18-year-old Emma who had just revolutionized adaptive technology, who had been accepted to MIT at 16, who commanded respect from some of the world's most brilliant minds. I think you should do whatever feels right to you, Emma. You're an adult now, and this is your choice to make. Will you support whatever I decide? Always. Emma was quiet for a long moment. I want to see her. Not because I'm ready to forgive her, but because I want her to see who I became despite what she did to me. I want her to understand exactly what she lost. 2 weeks later, Sarah arrived at my Boston office looking like a woman who had aged a decade in 3 years. Her hair was streaked with premature gray, her clothes were clearly from discount stores, and she carried herself with the defeated posture of someone who had learned too late that actions have permanent consequences. Emma was waiting in my conference room, looking radiant in a designer dress that complemented her state-of-the-art wheelchair. She had agreed to see her mother, but only with me present, and only for 30 minutes. "Hello, Mom," Emma said quietly when Sarah entered the room. Sarah stopped in the doorway, her hand flying to her mouth as she took in the confident, accomplished young woman her daughter had become. Emma, you look so successful, Emma suggested. Happy? Accomplished? Beautiful, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. You look absolutely beautiful. They talked for 27 minutes. Sarah apologized repeatedly, cried constantly, and begged Emma to consider giving her another chance. Emma listened politely, but with obvious emotional distance, occasionally asking pointed questions about why Sarah had made the choices she did. I was scared, Sarah finally admitted. I was scared of your disability, scared of the responsibility, scared that I wasn't good enough to be your mother. So I convinced myself that you were the problem instead of admitting that I was failing you. And now? Emma asked. Now I know that you were never the problem. You were always extraordinary. I was just too selfish and immature to see it. When the 30 minutes were up, Emma had heard everything she needed to hear. She wheeled herself to where Sarah was sitting and looked directly into her eyes. Thank you for apologizing, Emma said calmly. It means something to hear you say that you were wrong. But understanding why you hurt me doesn't undo the damage you caused. I know that, Sarah whispered. I'm not angry with you anymore, Mom. I don't have room in my life for anger about the past. But I also don't have room for people who see me as a burden or a limitation. Grandma Annabelle showed me what it feels like to be valued for who I am, not pitted for what I'm not. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. I hope you figure out how to be happy without us, Emma continued. But that journey doesn't include me. You made your choice 3 years ago, and I've made mine now. After Sarah left, Emma and I sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. How do you feel? I asked finally. Free, Emma said simply. I needed to see that she finally understands what she lost. Now I can move forward without wondering if she ever really knew what she threw away. That evening, we had dinner at Le Jardin Étoile Boston, where Emma was celebrating her acceptance to a PhD program that would make her one of the youngest doctoral candidates in MIT's history. As we toasted her future, I realized that my revenge was complete in ways I had never anticipated. I hadn't just punished Sarah and Mark for abandoning Emma. I had given Emma everything they never could: love, support, opportunity, and the unshakable knowledge that she was valued for exactly who she was. They had tried to erase Emma from their lives because they saw her as a burden. Instead, they had erased themselves from the life of someone who became extraordinary despite them. The gift they couldn't return was their own daughter, and now they would spend the rest of their lives knowing exactly what that gift was worth. And that's how you turn abandonment into absolute triumph. If this story moved you, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of people who turned their darkest moments into their greatest victories. Share this with someone who needs to see that sometimes the most devastating betrayals lead to the most beautiful transformations. Hit the notification bell so you never miss another story of justice.